So let me go back to Toyin before I go back now to the last question where each of you will give us something. But Toyin, this question is asking, what are the two key enabling factors in economic policy development and formulation that would contribute to the realization of the aspirations of Agenda 2063 and 2030, Agenda 2030? It feels like that's a question that can also be addressed to me, but I think it's good to hear a private sector perspective on what you see to be two key enabling factors in economic policy development and formulation that would contribute to the realization of these two great agendas.
Yes. So my quick answer, I'm going to give a short answer and a more a lengthy answer. The short answer is bring private sector to the room, to the table, as the policies are being crafted and designed. They are the ones to implement it. They are the ones to execute it. So they need to be a part of that decision making. That's my short answer. But my long answer is really, just to share a little bit about my background, what drives the work I do, and how we do this work. My background is serving in the world's largest company, Walmart headquarters, working in merchandising, working in global sourcing, the decision-making process that the world's biggest buyer makes before they decide where they're going to buy, okay? And within the context of that global framework, what became evident to me was we weren't seeing Africa's private sector emerging on the landscape. Meaning, as the global decision-making process is being made, we weren't seeing the private sector coming to the table to declare, this is what I want to sell, this is what we want to buy. Not at the global level and the scale that I was part of. And that is what motivates me to do all of this work, because what we have seen on our platform is transformation. When we provide market linkages for private sector, be it small business or large businesses on the continent, when we connect them to the market, magic happens. We have, for example, members from northern Nigeria where there's conflict today. We have members that have shipped face masks to the US market through market connectivity and training and coaching and hand-holding. That is the practical side of policy implementation in the private sector, is making sure that we're building capacity, but we're also hand-holding the businesses and connecting them to market within the context of the AFCFTA. This is what I want to say. The AFCFTA has systematically created a huge, in an artificial way, it has created a huge demand for made in Africa. What this means in the private sector is you now have almost an assurance that there is a new demand for what it is you're producing, which then allows you to go into the trade financing institution. Because when you think about the cycle of trade development, you want demand, you want capacity building, you also need trade financing, because if there is demand and you want to build capacity, you need somebody to finance you. So those are the players that we do bring together. But one of the other things that personally gives me concern and means the reason I play a more active role when it comes to AFCFTA is because I've seen a somewhat similar policy like the African Growth and Opportunity Act that was created by the United States government. It has been on the books for 20 years, but as of today, we still find that we have to educate people. So education is key. We have to educate people. We have to mobilize the private sector to now use the AFCFTA. Because having amazing policy is fantastic, but the private sector must be mobilized. And the other conversation finally that I have within the private sector is to inspire them and to encourage them to go out there and fish. Because sometimes we find that the private sector sits back, sometimes expecting that the information and knowledge and education that they need to sustain their business will come and meet them. So I coach the people I coach. I also teach them how to understand what the AFCFTA is, What does it mean to their business? How can they leverage it? How can they start building partnerships beyond their own borders to actually lift this up and build prosperity for the people in their community through job creation?
No, thank you so much, Toyin. We have two very accomplished policymakers with us here and diplomats also, Ambassador Wolf and Ambassador Muchanga. And the interesting thing is the connection between what you're saying about private sector and what they are saying. And I think this question of the private sector in Africa, I think we've not paid enough attention to it. And I think the way you have said that the AFCFTA has provided the demand, and what we need to do is actually to grow that capacity of our private sector to take, because they are assured of the market. And you have Afrexim Bank and even other financing institutions that are there because they know there is a market. So the risk of not being able to get money paid back is actually lessened, lowered by the existence of a market that actually has continental rules. So no, thank you very much for responding to that question in the way you have responded to it. So now we are going now to the final leg. And I think this one, basically what I have before me is just to ask each one of you. And I think now we will start, no, I think we start again with Ambassador Wolf so that you don't take the floor again immediately after. Yeah, so it's to ask each one of you to think of some action-oriented recommendation that on how African governments, specifically those in the context of conflict, could utilize the frameworks and tools at their disposal to harness trade towards achieving sustainable peace and security outcomes. It's actually a loaded question, I must say. How can African governments, specifically those in contexts of conflict, or maybe risk of conflict, utilize the frameworks and tools at their disposal to harness trade towards achieving sustainable peace and security outcomes? So DDG Wolf, I'll let you go first. I know you gave us the example of Liberia, Yemen, and yeah, so, but let's hear what you would want to say on this.
Well, thank you very much. What we're looking for is synergy. We have a series of communities that are really engaged in trying to help conflict-affected and fragile economies. We can do more together. So the Trade for Peace program is trying to bring together the communities of trade, peace, and the humanitarian workers and see what we can do to elevate the development of assistance that's needed for the countries that are in this condition. In the WTO, it's about the accessions division. It's about bringing more technical assistance to the countries in the process of accession. There's a lot of domestic reform that has to take place in order to join the WTO. Albert Muchanga and I were in Addis Ababa, and there was a lot of optimism a year ago when we were there about the domestic program. And we talked about how it keyed into the international rules and joining the integration into the world economy, as well as integration across the African continent. The whole idea of a free trade agreement, theoretically, was not just to help those who are members of it, but to help the whole world by generating more trade creation than there would be trade diversion from lowering barriers on less than an equal basis for all. What are we doing in the Trade for Peace program? We have an annual Trade for Peace Week, which elevates the issue. We create a platform